special request too. This has been a very busy week of lectures. We had a lecture on Monday, so I appreciate everybody coming out. We have another one. We have another one. We have another lecture tomorrow evening and a workshop over the weekend. So it's been a busy week. Thanks for coming to this one. This is a special lecture, and I'm just going to introduce the introducer, but I will say just a few words about the speaker. Margaret Griffin is a graduate of our school. She runs a really incredible office in Los Angeles called Griffin Enright. She also is a professor at Southern California Institute of Architecture, and she's on our board of advisors. Perhaps most importantly, she was the external reviewer for our last NAB review, and we thank her enormously for that, because if we don't pass the NAB review, there's no point in any of us being here. Yeah. No, we can all go home. So we're very happy. You may know we got 8 years. This is just something else you probably don't know anything about, but it's important. So thank you for coming. I'm going to now introduce Molly Hunter, who is going to give a more formal introduction. And I will do so. Molly, please. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael, and thank you, Margaret, for being here tonight. We're super thrilled to have Margaret lecturing tonight. As you probably all know, Margaret is one of our visiting critics this semester, and this is a special, she's a special visiting critic, the D. Kenneth Sargent visiting critic. So we're thrilled to have her talk a little bit more about her work tonight. As Michael mentioned, she's a graduate of our program. She then went on to get her M.Arch at the University of Virginia. She is co-founder and principal of the LA-based office Griffin Enright Architects, which is a collaborative practice recognized for its noteworthy and forward-thinking designs since 2000. Their work combines innovation and experimentation to explore cultural complexities relative to the built environment. Griffin Enright Architects' work has been extensively published, exhibited locally, nationally, and internationally, and has received over 50 awards for design excellence, including local, state, and national AIA awards, and the American Architecture Award from the Chicago Athenaeum. In addition to guiding a progressive practice, Margaret has taught graduate and undergraduate architectural design for over 23 years at universities including USC, UCLA, here at Syracuse University, UT Austin, and SCI-Arc, where she is currently on the design faculty. In 1989, Margaret was a fellow at the American Academy in Rome, where she investigated the relationship between urban form and landforms, a subject that she continues to examine in her practice through the integration of landscape and urban design. Margaret further expands her leadership in both the professional and academic settings as a member of Santa Monica's Architectural Review Board, and as an advisory board member here at Syracuse University, and previously as the director, or as a director on the LA AIA Board of Directors. So please join me in welcoming Margaret Griffin.
Can you guys hear me? So thank you. Thanks so much to everyone, to Michael and to Molly. It's an honor to be back in Slocum Hall. It's really fantastic to be working with students down in the Visiting Critics Studio, and I'm excited to be here tonight to share some of our work with you. Make sure I can make sure this works. So being here causes me to reflect on the fact that John and I are part of the lineage of Warner Seligman. And by extension, this means we're also descendants of the Texas Rangers. So last year I taught a visiting critic studio at UT Austin, which is where the Texas Rangers were originated. And that caused me to think about the educational transformation that the Texas Rangers proposed and the impact that had on our thinking, John and mine. Steeped in history and drawing, we studied space as a volume, and we were taught to think about space as matter. We drew axons of negative space And we never drew perspectives. So actually, I would take issue with this part of the, let's see, where is it? Discourage the sculpting and shaping of a building's mass in favor of the visualization and organization of space. I would say it was in favor of the conceptualization and organization of space. Because we actually were, not only did we never do perspectives, we were like dissuaded from ever drawing perspectives. So we were trained in the classics, in history. We were trained in space, proportion, movement, and order. And really, under Werner's tutelage, this often meant an awfully lot of Corb. We studied figure grounds and cities, and how to think of streets as rooms in the city. And these fundamental tools serve us well in our practice today. A true collaboration, the work shown tonight, is accomplished with John Enright, who John and I met in 1981. We started dating in freshman year of architecture school. So we did a variety of things separately, and we started our practice in 2000. But the work is a real collaboration with him that has been going on for the past 17 years. And it reflects our attempt to seek a new authenticity through new hybrids that accentuate local conditions while presenting new lasting identities. So today I'm going to show you how our project, Griffin Enright's, has something to do with the shaping and sculpting of a building's mass in favor of architectural space. Not quite what Werner had in mind, but partially his fault. Hybrid as a new strategy, or as a strategy for a new authentic. In a world where the thoroughbred, or the copy of a copy of a copy, has become everyday, perhaps an argument could be made for the mule as an analogy for a new vision for an authentic architecture. Underrated, the mule is a workhorse with a unique character, perhaps stubborn, arising from its qualities as a hybrid. The mule is a product of a horse and a donkey, but itself is irreproducible as a result. It cannot be copied. In a world where everything is a copy, perhaps the mule, or the hybrid, which cannot be copied, is one of a kind. Perhaps we crave the one of a kind. In our practice, we've been especially interested in hybrid qualities of matter, space, movement, and light, and their ability to generate new effects and new identity. We're obsessed with hybrid conditions of forms in space where multiple geometries create unfamiliar conditions that resist a singular description in favor of multiple readings. We come from an age that is pre-digital, a world of proportion, order, and spatial volume. And we conflate these qualities with new morphologies to create identities that transform existing contexts that can be described as one of a kind. Our projects are developed from synthesizing very basic architectural strategies, yet they often yield a nuanced quality that transforms the existing condition and elevates the project and architecture. We seek to transform effect and experience through new synthetic relationships among previously disparate parts. Hybrids naturally have this quality. They also have qualities from seemingly disparate parts while ultimately becoming a new whole, whose character resists the reduction to a singular reading or interpretation, adding to this character and to its authenticity. Recently, we've been reflecting on this diagram. We embrace the power of mass, stasis, and form, yet we are obsessed with the more ephemeral conditions of movement, space, and lightness. This diagram is comprised of opposites, complementary conditions of matter, each essential to the architectural condition, yet each with differing transformative qualities describing the inherent relationship among architectural qualities that we wrestle with while creating hybrids. We seek new hybrids, sometimes through new typologies, sometimes through new effect, sometimes as a synthesis of multiple geometries. We are interested in a blurry zone, somewhere between the fox and the hedgehog. We think the mule lives there. Our projects differ in scale and context, spanning a spectrum of environments from urbanscapes, landscapes, to interiors and domestic scapes. John and I are both urbanists by training. We use figure ground to understand the spaces of the city and to understand the relationship between mass and void in domestic spaces as well. Whether at the scale of a household, a school, a neighborhood, or a city, we seek new opportunities for cultural interaction to generate new relationships between previously discrete conditions. And we deploy strategic thinking to cross-examine the specific conditions, site-specific conditions to generate new opportunities. Today I'm going to show a handful of projects in no particular order, working on this topic of hybrids as a new authentic. In each example, we believe the hybrid condition has created a new authenticity. So the first project that I'm going to show is a house that we did in Los Angeles. And the house has this central space in it that is, in a very fundamental way, this kind of intersection of this kind of, let's say, system domino, kind of horizontal space with the kind of system citron, a vertical space. The house, it has this double-story space that moves through the house, and it culminates in a kind of pool that bends around in the other direction. Here you can see sort of entering into that slot of space. It's a very tight, this house is almost a semi-urban condition. You can see here that it's a very small site. And one of the main strategies that we used to maximize the volume of the house was to put the garage underneath the house and then put the body of the house as far forward to the street as we could to maximize a kind of garden oasis at the rear. And then by putting the garage underneath, we were able to get all the living spaces of the house in this zone of the house such that they could really open up to the garden space beyond. Here you can see this kind of main pathway, and you see this double-story like hallway that you enter into that is curved in plan. And that curve in plan works, north is directly up, so the sun rises, of course, in the east and sets in the west, so this curve also tracks the sun throughout the day, and it becomes a kind of internal sundial for the house. Here you can see an image at night from the rear. So the other thing that we did was we took this kind of element of the city, especially in this part of the city, which is the backyard pool, and we brought the backyard pool like into the house, like into this double-story slot that you see here. Here you can see this kind of figure ground showing that idea of the space of the house and how the space of the house like enlarges to feel like it's the volume of the whole site. This curved slot of space that's the main hallway is also kind of on axis with the sycamore tree that is out at the street. So when you enter the house, you kind of arrive on this curved path, and then when you, at a certain moment, you get, like in the beginning, you just kind of get a glimpse through the house, but as you go farther on the path, there's a moment where the whole house opens up and you feel the whole yard. So this curve not only has this quality of light that it brings into the space, it also creates like this threshold condition where you at first just have a glimpse into the house, and at a certain moment after you go up a few stairs and you arrive in the middle, this whole the kind of horizontal space of the house opens up and you feel like you've really arrived at that moment. So this is looking back to that entrance there, and here you see this this double-story space also organizes the kind of movement system of the house. So here you see this kind of ground plane like going up, reaching up to this part of the stair, and then you see these floating stairs that land at another landing where you have a view of the Hollywood Hills, and then that turns you around to looking back into the backyard. And then on this side above is the master bedroom, and on this side above is the children's room. And there's this kind of glass bridge connecting it all. And the light that comes into this space is an indirect light. So there's a shade canopy at the top that is also shaped in specific manner to make indirect light into this space. And it is covered with a refracted, it's a three-form panelite system that has these small tubes in it, and it creates these refractions with the light. So you get an extreme amount of natural light, but this direct light is a more rare condition. This is pretty much at noon where you get is the main time where you get this reflected light, but throughout the rest of the day it's a very indirect light. And you can be sitting at this kitchen counter or in the living room over here and read a book in the middle of the day with no lights on. When you experience the house laterally, there's something's all getting cropped, but anyway, all the photos are cropped, keep that in mind. There's the way that the house works across the house gives you these kind of, because of the way the double-story space slices through the space, you get these more horizontal readings of space and more lateral readings that connect out to the yard. This is a view looking back to that center space, and this is the point where you turn and go up to the other level. That's the master bedroom. Of course, all the typical tropes of Los Angeles, such as telescoping doors and porches outside of your bedroom are also handled. It's kind of basic bathroom, but you see how the light is brought into the bathroom and how the volume of the bathroom is expanded through this mirror that is perpendicular to the windows. This is the main entrance, and this is how the parking goes underneath the house. And so basically by lifting the house just a little bit above the ground, we get a semi-subterranean parking that can slip under there. And this is that slot of space through the center of the house. And this is looking back to the pool in the backyard. The pool becomes this kind of object, and this space of the house moves out to the outdoor deck, and then it descends, and the pool extends out as an object beyond. Here's where the pool comes into the house, and this is the kind of living and the kitchen. Here you can see the view where the pool begins to kind of pop out of the ground and become an object. So the next project I want to talk about is a project that we did for a school, for a Catholic grade school called St. Thomas. The existing church site was here, and the existing school was here, and our addition is back here. And so this whole site is owned by the same parish that owns this site. And so it was important to make a kind of connection between these two. The school itself is in one of the densest parts of Los Angeles. This parish has over 8,000 families and over 20,000 parishioners. It's an extremely densely populated area of Los Angeles. And our site is right here. And it's a kind of island that's surrounded by some things. This is a park over here. This is a cemetery in the back. And this right here is part of another school that is Loyola High School. That is a separate, that's a Jesuit high school. So our little site was very impacted. And so some of the strategies that evolved had to do with this kind of site condition. And the main thing that we wanted to do was extend a kind of space. We wanted to extend the space of the sidewalk into the site via a new pathway that we created by maintaining this kind of void through the whole site, so that when you would look down the street, there's a feeling like the street continues. And then our new project is here, and then this is the existing building that we also renovated. This project was done for an extremely low budget. This was built for 1/4 the cost of a typical LAUSD school. So LAUSD means Los Angeles Unified School District. So on this project, every single constraint on the project became a design opportunity. So for example, the existing building is here and it was not ADA accessible. So one of the main things that the new project needed to do was bring the current building up to current ADA standards. So we added a new elevator here and we made our project floor heights align with the existing projects and connecting it to the bridge. But we also needed to add a ramp to the site. So instead of just making a 4-foot wide handicap ramp, we decided to overscale the handicap ramp and turn it into a street, like a new pedestrian way into the site. And this is an example of what it looks like when there's an event going on at the school. So at the end of the street, we made a big porch that you see here, which is this space here, and that porch was made by simply taking the trusses that we already needed for the gym and cantilevering them out to cover the porch. Super strategic. Those are just Volcroft off-the-shelf trusses. We have this row of columns also was super strategic because that became our shear diaphragm by making these diagonal columns. This whole thing is our shear diaphragm. So in this project, every single move solved like 3 or 4 or 5 problems at a time. Another important component was basically the fire road that was needed. Which was, we wrapped the fire road all around the outside of the project, and that became a new drop-off for the school. Up until this time, the kids got dropped off in the streets and had to walk to school, and it was a problem for all the residents, and it was also a safety problem for the school. So this new drop-off, it ramps half a story down to parking that's underneath the new building, and then it ramps back up to make a new arrival at the front of the new building and to provide enough queue space for the drop-off, for the morning drop-offs. The other thing that we were really interested in, and so under here you see the semi-subterranean parking that's under the new playground. By placing our building on this side of the building, on this side of the site, north is up in this drawing too, the building provides shade in the whole playground. The students here stay at school until 6 o'clock, but they're done with school at 3 o'clock. So from 3 to 6, they spend the majority of their time on the playground. So this new shaded playground that's now shaded between 3 to 6 p.m., it took anywhere between 15 to 20 degrees off of the temperature of that playground and provided a much more livable space to hang out while you're waiting for your parents to pick you up. The other thing that we are interested in doing in terms of this bridge that we made to the existing school was to create a new circuit, a new kind of loop of sequence. So building on the kind of circulatory system or the circulation system of the building, the new outdoor path and the new bridge and the new stairs that we all kind of make a new circuit that gives more opportunities for how they circulate around the site. So here you can see this kind of big porch that we made and how that porch is used. Like this is a great example of what happens after school. Some kids are using the lunch tables to do their homework. Other kids are playing games. Here you can see that new connectivity with the circulation and the spatial sequence that we are interested in. This is just showing you what we already talked about in terms of the loop. And this becomes a kind of new front for the school, which is on the inner part of the school. This school is used 24/7. The school is used during the day by the kids who go to school. At night, it's used for adult education, and on the weekends, it's used for both adult and children religious education. So this school, we worked a lot on the lighting condition, and it's seen not only on the days when it's dark when they arrive at school, but it's like really an important character of the school is the way that this new space that we made becomes a new nexus for the whole community. So that's just kind of seeing it from the back. This is that elevator that's integrated, and this is the bridge connecting to the existing building. The existing building was built in the 1819 and is a non-reinforced masonry construction, and We just basically cleaned that up, and then we actually dug, it had a basement, and we dug the basement out in order to get more light into the basement. The main spaces that we added was this new multi-purpose room, which is critical because the school didn't have any place to meet as a whole body. And this double functions as a meeting space and as their volleyball court. And again, the main, like, here, one of our main, let's say, design devices was paint, because of the budget was so low that we really only had paint to work with on the interiors. And we were able to afford an acoustic ceiling that actually worked really well. So this just gives you some other qualities of that main nexus space. And so not only does that space like work as a kind of lunchroom on a daily basis, that space becomes a new stage for the school where they can have, and for the parish, where they can have events for 5,000 and 6,000 people. And when they do their events, which are in the afternoon, everyone is in the shade, and the kind of lunchroom becomes the stage. And this is the kind of inner pathway. So part of the parking requirement of the school was we had to park like 180 cars, because we had to park all the cars from the church. So this path not only takes you up to the school, but once you get there, you can take the stairs down to parking, or there's another little way down to parking on the side. So this path not only connects you like into the school, but when you're a parishioner and you're walking back to your car, you're using this all the time. And then the people end up like gathering at the picnic table area and hanging out before they leave. So of course, it works well for all sorts of events that are held there. This one reason why this is a new nexus for the community is because lots of events are held in this space, mainly because we made this like big porch-like element. That's John, still looking good. And that's just another view of the front. So around the same time when that project was under construction, or well, it was under development, I should say, we were working on this project, which was a competition that we did for, it was called the Vertical Garden Competition. It was for the MAC LA. We were one of the winners of this competition, I guess. It was never built, but the competition was, this was part of the competition brief. So this is the site plan of the Schindler House. And this orange line represented where the vertical garden was supposed to go, because over here was being built a new condominium that people from MAC LA were all upset about. So over here was the new condominium that was going to be built, and over here there already was a condominium, and then this is the MAC house in LA. So one of the things that interested us in this project is that, you know, this is what the area used to look like when the MAC Center, or when the Schindler House was built, and it was like a bean field. It was in the middle of nowhere. And now this is what this part of LA looks like. The height limit here is 50 feet tall. It's all multifamily residential. So this is actually zoned multifamily residential, and then that's why there was a condominium going up right here. So even though there's still single-family residences in this neighborhood, like the norm is this 50-foot tall multifamily residential. So what we were interested in the project is we were reflecting on the fact that, you know, the original context of the Schindler House really doesn't exist anymore, and the Schindler House is not even a house anymore, it's a museum, and so we were really interested in kind of rethinking the problem, let's say. And so instead of making a vertical wall, we decided to just encase the whole Schindler House, to like basically strip out all the gardens, suspend the Schindler House in air, and wrap it with 2 sets of double helix ramps. And then those 2 sets of double helix ramps end up making 3 spaces. A rooftop garden, like the space of the Schindler House, and an amphitheater 50 feet below. So basically we went 50 feet up, we went 50 feet down. So the new garden that we put on the roof is at the new datum of the new, like we thought of the rooftops of all these other projects as a new datum in the city. And that's where we put the roof garden. And so this is a view kind of looking into the site, seeing the kind of carved out amphitheater below, seeing the kind of suspended Schindler house, which enhanced its condition as an artifact, and seeing the kind of oculus through the rooftop garden above. So this is a view of that rooftop garden, showing how you could see, like from that rooftop garden down back through to the street. This is a kind of axon as if you removed, as if you pulled it out of the earth. So the ground plane is here. So above the ground, you have these sets of ramps, and below the ground, you have these sets of ramps. But it's literally like a continuous loop that you could just walk on, forever. And here you see that in section, how there's this kind of amphitheater below, and then there's this space for the Schindler house, which is seen as an object, and then the garden above. And so the public space of the project really is these ramps. And then there's a quality of sometimes you're on this surface, and sometimes you're kind of in between. So there's a surface that we made between the ramps that moves between the ramps. So sometimes you're on the inner part of the skin, and sometimes you're on the outer part of the skin. So sometimes you're more connected to the city, and sometimes you're more connected to the Schindler house. And in a way, we thought of it as a little bit of a ship in a bottle, meaning that it's a way of saying that the Schindler house is an artifact. It's no longer the Schindler house. And then these are some of the views. So even though we had this kind of radical idea about it, this is all it's all to code, meaning that we kept all of the setbacks, and these handicap ramps are all fully accessible. And so we took it quite seriously, the kind of that this could be in the city, and as a proposition for how it would be in the city. So these are some of the views through. This project was a small project that we did, but it relates to a lot of the things that I'm talking about tonight, so I'm going to show it. We were shortlisted. This was a competition for the cafe at SCI-Arc, and we were shortlisted, but we were not chosen. SCI-Arc, some of you may know, is this figure right here, which is a quarter-mile long, the building. So it's a very long building. It's longer than the Empire. I think the Empire State Building is the same height as this is long. So our proposal, the competition called for putting the cafe at this end of the building, down here. And instead, what we thought we would do is, our proposal was to kind of unearth the railroad tracks that exist in front of the whole building, and sort of reuse a set of railroad tracks and make a new kind of clip-on, get a train chassis and build on top of the train chassis, kind of like like a food truck. Before the days of the food trucks, actually, and then develop a kind of clip-on system such that this whole piece could move up and down the building like a slow dirigible. And so if there was an event down at this end, it could be parked there. If there was an event at the gallery, it could be parked here. If there was an event at the lecture hall, it could be parked here. And it would kind of be able to move up and down the building. It also had solar panels. So these were flexible solar panels that would power both the kitchen itself and also the movement up and down the building. And it would be able to be closed at night, but it also made a space, a kind of shaded space between, let's say, the dirigible and the building, and this would be a new kind of porch space, a new gathering space. So wherever it was parked would become a new kind of hangout space outside of the building. And this facade is a very, very long and generic facade, so it also becomes a kind of new sign about what's happening on campus. This project we did along with 1,700 other colleagues of ours. We did not win. The one that did win is not getting built, unfortunately, but I think we all knew that, all of that going in. But we were really fascinated with, you know, the idea of not only working at the edge of a harbor, so not only was the site kind of super interesting to us, but just the idea of the Guggenheim and its lineage and the opportunity to kind of reflect on like what could be a new museum. So what we proposed was this piece sitting at the edge. Essentially, most of our building was lifted off the ground that you see here. So we touched the ground in only 3 points, and actually another small point over here, but 3 main points. And this was an accessory kind of piece, that's the restaurant. And really we left the whole site like open for an art park and for public area. So what we could do is there was an existing pathway along the water that we extended in front of our project so that you could continue through. There's a kind of inner street that we developed in our project that goes in here, so you could you know, like cross the street here, enter through the park, come through the inner street, and go back into the city. We have like a bridge that goes over and connects directly to the park, so you could come across the bridge and come down a set of stairs and come through. So what we were interested in was to activate the public space of the site and reconnect the city to the water and the park to the water, and then therefore the water to those elements too. So this is our piece sitting on the site. So here you see there was one of the parts where it touched the ground was a small auditorium, and that auditorium had a stage to the inside, and that same stage could open up to the outside and create an outdoor amphitheater here. The service was, the way to get the art in was on this part of the connection to the ground, and the other part of the connection to the ground over there was the entrance. And this is that inner walkway that I was talking about, like between, like that's going through the museum. This is the view from the water. You know, obviously we're also really thinking about like the scale of the harbor, and our project has a lot to do with not only the scale of the buildings at the edge of the harbor, but the scale of other elements in the harbor, like big ships and things like that. Our project has when you see it from different parts of the city, like if you saw it from the park or if you saw it from inside the city, each way that you see it has a different kind of character or a different kind of quality to the way that you understand the building. Here you can see how it's floating, and then how there's this one piece that provides a little bit of structure, but we have this kind of deep cantilever. So here you can see some of the scale of the ships. There's often another ship parked here, but these ships are like bigger than some of these buildings that are at this edge, and this is a pretty dense town with a pretty high building height. But you can see how our project is like somewhat relating to these elements and also to the city. In section, the whole building had this like exoskeleton all around it, so that we could have very long spans and open interiors to give a lot of flexibility for the curatorial, you know, for whatever the curators want to make. So the main floors that had the art were the top 3 floors, this floor, and this floor, where the art was. Here's the auditorium that you see connected to the outside auditorium. Here's the main entrance. Here's the kind of view through to the park. And the main sequence is that you would enter here and you would take 2 escalators up to the 3rd floor, and then you would start the loop of the galleries. But we made the circulation in the galleries able to be flexible so that you could curate it in a variety of different ways. Here's some of the quality of that plaza. This is this kind of main cross section. Back here is like the bookstore, and here's the 3 levels of galleries, and here's another 3 levels of galleries. This shows how the project frames the view of the harbor from the city. So this is the view you would get if you arrive from the city. And this is how you know, for instance, components of the harbor would be framed. This little window right here, which is a little bit like an eye, from this one corner, when you stand on this corner, you can look through that window and look up into the, get like a little peek up into the main gallery space. And this shows you some of that inner circulation. This shows that this is the second floor. You don't really need to see that. It's actually mislabeled. That's not the first floor. This is the third floor. Anyway, these are just some of the plans. And you can see how this inner street kind of comes in as a space in the building and how you kind of move around that thing. This is the kind of space inside of this nose piece right in here. And so that's the big cantilever there. So this is a kind of semi-related house. It's a house that we did in Malibu, in Point Dume. So Point Dume is especially, I don't know, Bob Dylan lives in Point Dume. You know, it's a special part of LA where I think Tom Petty used to live in Point Dume until a couple days ago. It's a part of LA that is like this, has a cult-like, I don't know, almost mythic kind of place in everyone's mind in LA. So Point Dume is called Point Dume because there's this big point right here that's a big rock. And then behind that big, so when you look up the whole coast, when you're driving up to Malibu, you see this kind of big rock on the edge, and that's Point Dume. Behind that big rock, which is right here, is another big rock which splits our site in half. So that other big rock is like over here. So this right here is a big retaining wall. This is a 2-story retaining wall that this half is sitting on the other point and this half is below. So the site is kind of bisected by this big retaining wall. And when we were brought onto the project, this retaining wall already existed. And it was pretty much the only thing that existed. So what we were really thinking about on this site, so you can see how the site is oriented this way, which actually the coastline continues here, so you can see ocean out there too. And north is up again on this. So what we looked at in developing the project was these, we looked at the kind of topography of the coastline, and we began to kind of play with this kind of S form, which derived from this geometry of the coastline. And one of the interesting things about like the way that we started to peel this geometry back was because we peeled it back on the second floor that you'll see in a moment in order to capture nighttime views of the city. So when you look out at an ocean over the day, that's really beautiful, but at night, if you're just looking to an ocean, it's just black. So part of what we wanted, whereas a city view, when you see city lights, that's more interesting to look at night. So we are trying to, we inflected the building to capture the better views at the nighttime on the second floor. So these are the two plans. The building is partially dug into the ground. I don't know why they're so pixelized, but it's partially dug into the ground. So you arrive half a story above the main level. So you arrive at the back, and then you descend into this curved hallway. You can go half a story down to the main level, or you go half a story up to the second level, and this is where the second level peels back to capture the views to the Santa Monica. Here you can see this overall site section and how it's sitting up on the big hill, and then the pool, and how it's like partially carved in. So this is why it's in some way it's like part landform. Is because it's kind of nestled into the ground, but also its form has so many different faces that it has a mammalian-like quality as well. So this is one of the faces at that joint. This is the main entrance, and when you enter, you get this kind of glimpse through, and then you end up in this double-story space that's clear story lit from above, and you descend down in. This is the view from the bedroom looking back at that entry. And then you kind of end up in this very horizontal space that frames a horizontal view of the Pacific Ocean. So again, it's this kind of threshold condition that the entry sequence makes, so that when you finally see the ocean, it's like a wow. It's sort of revealed through this curved double-story hallway that ends in the horizontal space. And then this wall beyond, this kind of edge that you're moving along continues and bends around through this wall beyond, and then this kind of pool, a lap pool in there, extends a view back out to the ocean. So this is the kind of fire road that comes up and wraps around, and then you see the ocean here. So what we were looking at here was some strategies to have the bedrooms in the back get ocean views. So we developed this kind of peel outs that gave this strong mass reading that we wanted, but still provided these opportunity to connect those spaces to the ocean. And one of the peel outs happens at the master. So here you can see the other side where that wall kind of climbs up and bends around, and how there's this porch space that's made at the knuckle between the house and the pool. And you see that here. We also did the whole landscape design for this project. And for a lot of our projects, we do the landscape as well. Although in most of the photos, that's not really, the landscape's usually not very mature because it takes so long. So this project is another tiny project that we did, but has a lot to do with kind of the evolution of this approach that we've been working on. This was an installation that we did at SCI-Arc, and it was called Keep Off the Grass. And you know, at SCI-Arc there's a gallery, and every other month an architect works on an installation in there. And so we were interested in working with sod, because we were interested in its condition as like partially organic but partially man-made. Because the type of sod that we used for our exhibition was a hydroponic sod, and a hydroponic sod is grown in the desert on these visqueen sheets, and it's highly manufactured even though it happens to be an organic material. So we are interested in this kind of condition of something that's like part organic and part man-made. And so what we did was we made these two curved beams out of plywood, and we created a ruled surface in between the two beams, and we created an undulating surface. And we suspended this whole plane of grass, like we floated it in the space. And this line that you see back here was like a water line. And above that line, we had a bunch of statistics about some of the dilemmas of the overuse of sod in desert environments, especially like LA. And this is some of the construction of that. That water line, maybe I'll just go back, that line represented that the amount of, if you filled the whole room up with water to that line, that's how much water it would take to keep this amount of, this area of grass alive for 1 year. So we were relating like the volume of the room to the life cycle of this sod. And with our proposal, we did not water the grass. Instead, we placed these pools of water underneath the sod that kind of reflected the structure of our piece. But we on purpose did not water the sod, and we were interested in the entropy that it would undergo. And you can see some of that entropy happening here. Some of the entropy happened when the grass was stacked and it almost caught on fire before we could get it on. Like the night when we were putting it on, we couldn't get it on there fast enough, and so these are like burn marks from it starting to heat up. This is that diagram showing you the relationship between the volume of the room to the area of the sod. These are some of the statistics that were on the wall above the water line. And this is what happened when, over the course of the whole exhibit, what happened is that the sod all shrunk. So when it didn't get water, it just shrunk, and when it shrunk, it created a new porosity between, you know, we had made this piece so that it kind of divided the space in two. It kind of made like an upper space that related to the hallway above, and this kind of lower space that was very human scale. And when the sod, at the end of the exhibit, when the sod all shrunk, it created, not only could you see these man-made 2x4 pieces, But you could also kind of have, it transformed the whole space of the room when it shrunk, because now suddenly there was a new porosity between the two. So this is a project that, these photos that you're going to see are not final photos. They're just like iPhone photos, but this is a project that we're about to shoot. It just finished. This is a house that we did in Pasadena. The house is just it's a renovation, but it's a very major renovation, but it has this really interesting site. This part of the house was existing, and it's like cantilevered off the hillside. This is a kind of 70s cantilevered box, and then this was also existing. It was built in the 20s, and it was like just kind of sitting on the ground. And then there was also part of the house was here originally, but it was this whole mishmash. So what we did was we demolished everything in the middle, and this is the part that we built new. So you have this kind of path that comes into the house, and then it continues through the skylight of the house out to the back. And so really this house is all about this loft-like space that we created, that's this kind of living, dining, kitchen, and also media room. So these are the sections you can see. Again, we use this kind of 2 sets of curves. In this case, it's actually 4 sets of curves. And it's made with, you know, it's a ruled surface, which means it can be made all out of straight lines. And here you can see this kind of worm's eye of that ceiling. And then here is the construction. So you can see how this complex shape was all able to be built out of, you know, out of studs. And here you can see more of that. And then you can see this kind of rough version of the drywall. And here you see the final like effect. The interesting thing about this skylight, so this skylight is curved in plan and in section, so we get an interesting complexity. Even though it's all built out of highly constructible surfaces that are ruled surfaces, you actually get a kind of complex curvature because the skylight is curved in plan and in section. And you also get these different qualities of light through this skylight that you can see here. And so this new roof, or ceiling, I should say, so, and the whole thing is just, this is structure up there, so the structure, which is just TGIs, spans the whole space, and the whole ceiling is just a drop ceiling. But the structure also double functions as a kind of baffle system for the skylight. So we wrap it with aluminum and it becomes a kind of baffle, bringing this kind of wonderful light in. And the kind of ceiling begins to frame, let's say the curvature of the ceiling or those quality in the ceiling begins to work with some of these kind of framed views of the hillsides beyond. And so the way the curves work is that they create like different, even though the whole room is like one loft-like room, you get a different quality in the kitchen versus the dining room versus the living room. And as you move through the house, it's quite dynamic when you move. It's hard to tell in these photos, but when you move around, you really feel a kind of quality to those curvatures. So this project also recently just finished and is not photographed professionally yet. This is, I only have a few more projects, this and one more, so hopefully I'm okay time-wise. Yeah. This is an office building that we did in Studio City, and it's a basic box. Our client owns the office, and he has his office on the 2nd floor, and the bottom floor is rented out for retail. And so this goal of this project was to kind of activate the sidewalk and the kind of corner condition. The site sits on this really interesting corner that right here where I'm standing is a gas station, and this is a kind of alleyway to a parking lot, but it's a pretty distinguished corner. And so we developed this facade that has a variety of cantilevered conditions, peel-out windows, as well as like volumes, entire volumes that are cantilevered out. So this volume that's cantilevered is our client's office. This piece is like his connection to his secretary's office. So when he walks to his secretary, he has this view to the hills through here. And then this other corner volume that you saw is the the conference room. So this kind of animated facade is all about, like it's both about some programmatic conditions on the inside, but also about kind of specifically wanting to animate it to the city beyond. So this is that view from the client's office when he's walking to the secretary's office, and this is a kind of view from the back. And this building was originally like a Tudor style. This is a renovation too, but it was like a gut job. So it was just basically we started with a box that had Tudor all over it, and then instead we were able to make this kind of new animated small office building in Studio City. Here you can see some of the qualities on the inside and the kind of way that it brings unique snippets of the city to the inside of the space. And then this last project, this is the very last project. This is a competition that we did recently that we were one of the, we participated in a competition for social housing sponsored by InfoNavit, which is I think they're actually a bank in Mexico, and they basically have a lot of defunct sites that they want to get reused. So they invited a whole series of architects to do proposals for a very tiny house, for a 485 square foot house, a 2-bedroom house. And I think there was around 60 architects that they invited to do propositions, and there was a lot. This particular round, they do this often, and they have a whole kind of series of these that they do. And this particular round had included American architects, which, and mostly, in the past, it's mostly been Mexican ones. Anyway, so our project has been chosen, and we just finished the construction documents for this. When we were working on the competition, we were interested in thinking of a kind of prototypical house. So not just a single house. So to design, like it's only one that's going to be built, but we wanted to think prototypically. And so basically we came up with 3 typologies, and 3 different typologies, and each one had 2 different kind of roof types, and then each one of those could be reflected twice. So you could have a total of 12 different prototypes that could make a new city. So what we looked at was like constraining the footprint as much as possible, like the tiniest, like really going straight to the 485 square feet, and doing a double-story house, and kind of making the footprint constrained, but exaggerating the vertical axis. So exaggerating the z-axis. So making the first floor like taller than you normally would, and making the second floor also taller than you normally would. So in the project, we just have a simple open, it's just one room on the bottom floor, and on the top floor, it's 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, and then just the kind of tiniest hall that we could make. And so part of what happens in our scheme is that there's a strategy for expanding the family, where you could get, you know, like you could have loft-like spaces in these kind of above in this kind of new attic space, let's call it, and you could have like also like triple-story bunk beds. So we considered this a kind of semi-urban typology, and so the first thing what we wanted to do was put the mass at the street, right at the sidewalk, so that the houses define the street. We wanted everyone to have a small yard and some place for cars, and then we thought that place for cars could double function as a place for market. You could sell, I don't know, you could sell some peaches that maybe you grew here, so we thought the yard could have some indigenous trees, but also some trees that might have edible things that you could eat, and that people could have gardens. So we were interested in developing an idea about like a kind of livable community. The other thing that was really the big factor was that all the houses had a porch, at least one porch, some had 2 porches. And the porch was really important because to expand the inside space, to make the inside space feel a little bigger, but also because this area where our project is quite rainy. So the only way to kind of have that expanded space would be if you could also have it covered from the rain. And basically the main shape, the main kind of tectonic was a kind of part of it is the vernacular, which is just a concrete frame and a block infill. And the other part is a candela-like thin shell concrete roof system that's made from ruled surfaces that are created from profiles and then extruding from the profiles to create each house had a special roof, and each of the special roofs kind of gave a character to that house. Those roofs could also get photovoltaics on top. They could collect water. They could, the attic space could hide the cisterns. So there's a variety of things. They could also be strategies for expansion. You could take over the porch as an inside space. So this is the kind of typical construction that they have in this area. So that's part of the vernacular, and then this is part of the candela-like roof, that strategy that we thought about. So, you know, like that's the typical construction. And these are the 3 types that we developed that you can kind of see here. So one type has the porch that faces east and west, which is this type. One type, which you can see kind of there. One type has a porch that faces south, and one type, which we call the T type because it's a T in section, has 2 porches. One porch facing the sidewalk, which is more for public, one porch facing the backyard. So, and then each type had, at least in this rendition, had 2 different roofs, so you get 6 different personalities from the 3 types. This is how it might make a street. So this is just basically on all the schemes, the wall that faces north, so north is up, the wall that faces north is a blank wall, so that when you begin to multiply the schemes, you can, like one wall is always blank, so if I have space facing that wall, this is still private for that person's yard. Or in the case of the porch facing this way, since that wall back there is more blank, you get like a private. So everyone has a private yard. This was the porch facing south, which is actually the one that we're going to be building. And this is the T-shaped one, which was also a commercial, a kind of small business type. So the T-shaped one put the living space and 2 bedrooms all on the upper floor, and also used that attic space for additional space, but put like a more public zone on the bottom floor that you could use for, you know, I don't know, selling widgets. But like the idea was that as you began to multiply the types, you would get, within the fabric of the neighborhood, you would get commerce so that you could have a more livable community. So not only were we interested in making the streets and the sidewalks, but that in inserting kind of commercial spaces and potential for small businesses within the town so that they could be more vital. So this is the one that is going to get built. And the new, so this is the site plan of it that has actually been developed by Michael Meredith, by Moss. And our project is here. So of course we've had to modify it a little bit. These are all the other participants that you see here, 32 firms. And here you can see that our site is near the parking. So this is all the parking. So there's no longer parking with these buildings. So it's more, this is almost like a Wiesenhof, I think, where it's like a display of different house types. And people are going to live here, but it's a kind of a different kind of neighborhood now. And so our project is right here. And you can actually see how tight we went on the square footage if you compare it to some of these other ones. And ours is on budget for $5,000, which I'm quite proud of. And so what we did was because we no longer have a yard space, we kind of inflected this wall that we had and just kind of bent it around a little to make a small private space here. And you can see, again, the kind of very basic layout of the house. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Do we have some questions?
Okay, great. Everyone's too shy.
Microphone's okay. What is your, what would you say is your next project that you have to work on?
As in, well, I think we're on our right path, I would say, in terms of the project. So if you're asking about our project, I feel like we're going to continue this project. But in terms of the stuff we have in the office, I mean, we have a lot going on. We have 10 buildings under construction. We have like 5 buildings that just finished that we haven't shot yet. And we have like, I don't know, 5 or more that were in development. So we have a lot going on. Yet we could always use new work. So anyone out there with a project, we could. We're doing, in Mexico, we're doing a 4-story apartment building now for the same Infonavit. Those are pretty much pro bono projects, though, so they don't exactly count for the commerce of the office, but they're super interesting. And working in Mexico City, or working with people in Mexico City, has been really fascinating. But I would say, you know, obviously, we appear to be stuck in sort of residential hell. It'd be nice to get out of it, but I'm not sure we're going to. We have a series of apartment buildings that we're working on now, so that might be one way out of residential hell. But at the same time, there's stuff we've been able to work through on the houses that we've been able to do that I think are pretty exciting, so it could be worse.
Other questions?
Great, well, thank you guys so much. Thanks, everyone.